IXL section S.17, write equations in standard form, escribiendo ecuaciones en forma estándar. Okay, first of all, let's review what standard form of a linear equation is. To be in the standard form, it's got to look like this. It's got to be ax plus by equals c. That's what your answers are going to look like today. They got to be in that form. Now, there's a couple of important conditions in order for your equation to be correctly written in standard form. First of all, a has to be a number greater than or equal to 0. You're not going to see a equal to 0 today, but basically a cannot be negative, all right? The number in front of x cannot be negative. A and b are not both 0. That's another condition, but you're not going to see that today. But just so you know that in standard form, a and b cannot both be equal to 0. And the last one you will see when you get into the challenge zone. A, b, and c are integers whose greatest common factor is 1. What that means is that when you write your answer in standard form, your final answer, you always got to check to see if A, B, and C could be divided by a number to make them smaller, to simplify them. If they could be divided to make them smaller, you got to do that. All right. Again, we'll see that in the challenge zone, and I'll go over it again. So there's 3 conditions, but there's really 2 that you're going to see today. The first one that you're going to see on almost every problem is that A cannot be negative. A cannot be negative. And the other one that you're going to see in the challenge zone is that A, B, and C are integers whose greatest common factor is 1. I forgot to mention one thing about that. A, B, and C are integers. That means that your final answer cannot have any fractions. Your final answer cannot have any fractions when it's in standard form. When we get to fractions, I'll show you how to get rid of the fractions in a very easy way. But A, B, and C have to be integers. They cannot be fractions, and their greatest common factor has to be 1. That means if you could simplify them, you got to simplify them. I'll show you that when we get to one of those examples. En la forma estándar de una ecuación lineal, las respuestas tienen que lucir de esta manera. Las ecuaciones se escriben de esta manera. AX más BY igual a C. A, B y C van a ser números. Y hay 3 condiciones importantes. Solamente 2 de las condiciones van a ver en este IXL. La primera es que A tiene que ser un número mayor que o igual a 0. En otras palabras, A no puede ser un número negativo. El número al frente de la X nunca puede ser negativo cuando está en forma estándar. La segunda condición es que A y B, los dos, no pueden ser 0. Eso no lo vamos a ver en este IXL, pero esa es otra condición para estar en esta forma. A y B, los dos no pueden ser 0. Uno o el otro, pero los dos no pueden ser 0. Y la tercera condición que lo van a ver cuando llegan al final de esta tarea es que A, B y C tienen que ser números enteros. Y el factor más grande que tienen en común tiene que ser 1. Así que en otras palabras, lo que eso quiere decir es que A, B y C no pueden ser fracciones. Tienen que ser números enteros. Si le salen fracciones, yo le voy a enseñar cómo quitar las fracciones cuando llegamos a ese ejemplo. Y esta parte del factor más grande que tienen en común tiene que ser 1. Quiere decir que si existe un número entero por cual se puede dividir A, B y C para hacerlo más chiquito, para simplificarlo, entonces se tiene que hacer eso. Se tiene que dividir y simplificarlo. Cuando llegamos a un ejemplo como eso, le enseño cómo hacer eso. All right, so let's look at our first example. The majority of these examples are very simple. Okay, so... All right, so again, to be in standard form, it's got to look like this. So the x and the y got to be on the same side. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is get x on the same side as y. And the number in front of x has to be positive. So as you can see, if I move the minus 5x, if I move it to the left by adding 5x to both sides of the equation, I'll have my answer, which will be... You know what, let me write it over here so it'll be a little clearer. If I move the minus 5x to the left by adding 5x to this side as well as to this side, what I'll end up having is I cannot combine these because they're not like terms. So what I'm going to have on the left is 5x plus y. And on the right hand side, this cancels out. So I'm going to be left with positive 6. And that's it. That's my answer. Para estar en la forma estándar, la x y la y tienen que estar en el mismo lado de la ecuación. Y a, que es el número al frente del x, tiene que ser un número positivo. Así que en este ejemplo, si muevo el negativo 5x para la izquierda, sumando 5x a los dos lados de la ecuación, ya eso me da la respuesta. Aquí esto no se puede sumar porque no son términos iguales, así que simplemente escribo 5x más y igual a 6 y ya, ahí tengo mi respuesta. Alright, moving on to the next example. This is basically the same thing. Esto es la misma cosa. So again, standard form has to be look like this. So if they give me y equals negative 10x minus 9, a lot of these you could just do mental math. Alright, you could do this one mentally, very simple, very simple. Okay, esto se puede hacer en la mente, no es necesario escribir todo esto. Alright, so I move the negative 10x to the left, and my answer is going to be 10x plus y equals negative 9. Ya aquí tengo mi respuesta, simplemente moví negativo 10x para la izquierda, sumando 10x a los dos lados, y ahí tengo mi respuesta. Alright, next example, again, same thing. Let me write it like this. Standard form looks like that. My problem says y equals negative 7x plus 8. So I'm going to move negative 7x to the left by adding 7x to both sides. And I'm going to get 7x plus y equals 8. Esta es la misma cosa. Moví negativo 7x a la izquierda y ahí tengo mi respuesta. 7x más y igual a 8. Alright, now this one is one where slight difference. Let's look at it a second. Okay, they give me this. Now you got to remember that a, which is the number in front of x, always has to be positive. And if you look right here, the number in front of x is already positive. If I move it to the left, it's going to become negative, and we do not want that. So you're not going to move 3x. Leave 3x right there. What you should move is the minus 1 to the left and the y to the right. So let me do that. Okay, en este problema, el número al frente del x, el número 3, ya es positivo. Si lo muevo para la izquierda, se va a convertir en negativo y no queremos eso. Así que debemos dejar el 3x en ese lado, en el lado derecho, donde está. Lo que voy a mover en lugar es el menos 1 para la izquierda, sumando 1 a los dos lados. Okay, so when I do that, I'm going to have y plus 1 equals 3x. And now I'm going to move the y to the right by subtracting both sides by y. You could have done all this in one move, okay? I'm just doing it like every little step. But you could have done this all mental math in one move. Okay, ahora la y lo muevo para la derecha, restando y de los dos lados. Alright, so my final answer is 3x minus y equals positive 1, but let me write it like this, 3x minus y equals 1. Ya ahí tengo mi respuesta final. Again, you could have done this mental math. You should realize that when you move y to the right, it becomes minus y, and when you move the minus 1 to the left, it becomes positive 1. So if you just switch their places, their signs switch. And you could just do it mental math. The more you could do correctly mentally, the stronger you're going to get all this stuff. If you could just look at it, look at the problem and see that. Okay, esto se puede hacer en la mente. Si miran el problema, se deben dar cuenta que si muevo la y a la derecha, va a ser menos y, y si muevo el menos 1 a la izquierda, va a ser positivo 1. Y ya eso me da la respuesta final. Alright, so here, again, here's my, oops, let me change it to a different color. Alright, so again, standard form is ax plus by equals c. So they give me y equals negative x plus 8. This is one of the simple ones. So just move the minus x to the left by adding x to both sides. And that'll give you your answer. Esta es fácil. Muevo negativo x para la izquierda, sumando x a los dos lados de la ecuación. Y mi respuesta es x más y igual a 8. Another simple one. We'll get to the more complicated ones in a second. But like I said, in this IXL, it's a good one to do after the winter break because it's nice and simple. And it just gets you back in shape slowly for the second half of the year. All right, so there's my standard form, and here's my problem. Y equals negative 8x minus 7. So I'm going to move the minus 8x to the left by adding 8x to both sides, and that'll give me my answer. 8x plus y equals negative 7 is my answer. All right, now here's another one where the number in front of x is already positive, so you shouldn't move it. Ok, aquí tenemos otro ejemplo donde el número al frente de x ya es positivo, así que no lo deben mover. Instead of moving the 8x to the left, I'm going to move the y to the right and the minus 1 to the left. En lugar de mover el 8x a la izquierda, lo que voy a mover es la y a la derecha, restando y de los dos lados. Y el menos 1 a la izquierda. So let me just do one thing at a time. Actually, let me do them both at the same time. You can just write this and this. Lo escribí los dos a la misma vez. Alright, so I'm moving the minus 1 to the left. Estoy moviendo el negativo 1 a la izquierda. So the y's cancel out, las y se cancelan, y lo que me queda a la izquierda es positivo 1. What's left on the left is positive 1, because the minus 1 you moved it to the left and it became positive 1. The y, I'm moving it to the right and it becomes negative y. Alright, and there's my answer. 8x minus y equals positive 1. It's actually, I think, easier to understand if you don't write this out. If you just look at it and picture that you're moving the minus 1 to the left and it becomes positive, and the y to the right and it becomes negative, that's the easiest way to do it. Honestly, the way I wrote it out makes it look even more confusing when it's actually super simple. Ok, es más fácil entender si no escriben todo esto, que lo hace lucir más complicado. Ok, si simplemente miran que estoy moviendo en menos 1 a la izquierda y se cambia a positivo 1, y y a la derecha y se cambia a menos y. In fact, writing all the steps together like that made it look confusing. I won't do that again. All right, here's another one of the easy ones. Aquí está otro fácil. Standard form, ax plus by equals c. So if y equals negative 6x plus 1, I'm going to move the minus 6x to the left by adding 6x to both sides. And I'm going to have 6x plus y equals 1. That's my final answer. Alright, so here's another one where the a is already positive, so you should not move it. Aquí tenemos otro donde a ya es positivo, así que no lo deben mover. So y equals 10x minus 6. Alright, so let me first move the 6 to the left so that I don't create a mess here. Let me just do one thing at a time. I'm going to move the 6 to the left by adding 6 to both sides. Voy a sumar 6 a los dos lados para no hacer un reguero aquí de números. So I'm going to have y plus 6 equals 10x. And now I'm going to move the y to the right by subtracting y. Ahora voy a mover y a la izquierda, restando y de los dos lados. When I do that, I'm going to have 6 equals 10x minus y, which is my final answer. And I'm going to write it like this. 10x minus y equals 6. Ya aquí tengo mi respuesta final. 10x menos y es igual a 6. Alright, so here we got y equals x minus 3. Y equals x minus 3. So again, the number in front of x is already positive. There's an invisible 1 there. So I'm not going to move x. I'm going to instead move the minus 3 to the left and the y to the right. Okay, el número al frente de x, la a, es positivo. Es un 1 invisible que está aquí. Así que no voy a mover el x. Voy a mover el menos 3 a la izquierda, sumando 3 a los dos lados, y después y a la derecha. Alright, so I got y plus 3 equals x. Again, there's an invisible 1 in front of x. So a equals 1. And now I'm going to move the y to the right by subtracting both sides by y. Ahora resto y de los dos lados. Y me da eso la respuesta final, que es x menos y igual a 3. Y lo voy a escribir de esa forma. X menos y igual a 3. Here's my final answer. X minus y equals 3. Alright, so these are all, we haven't gotten to the challenge zones one yet, so hopefully a lot of you guys are working on the IXL right now because these examples are pretty simple. When I get to the challenge zone, I'll make sure to let everybody know so you guys can pay attention. Alright, so again, standard form is ax plus by equals c, and they're giving me y equals 6x minus 8. The a is positive, so I'm not going to move 6x. I'm going to leave it where it's at and instead move the negative 8 to the left and the y to the right. Okay, otra vez tengo el número al frente de x. La a es positivo 6. Como es positivo, no lo voy a mover. Voy a mover primero negativo o menos 8 a la izquierda, sumando 8 a los dos lados, que me da y más 8 igual a 6x. Y y a la derecha, restando y a los dos lados. Y eso me da la respuesta final, 6x menos y igual a 8. 6x minus y equals 8. All right, now we're going to go over the problems that are in the challenge zone. So if you're doing IXL, you should stop a second and look. There's only 3 examples I'm going to go over, but they cover what's in the challenge zone, which is a little more challenging, and they're worth paying attention to. Okay, ahora voy a explicar los problemas que salen al final después que llegan a 90, que son un poco más complicados, para que vean cómo se hacen. All right, so here's my first example. So remember, to be in a standard form, it's got to look like this. All right, notice that C is the constant, the number that's just by itself with no variable. All right, so in this case, I got to move the negative 4 to the right in order to get it in this form. All right, so I'm going to move negative 4 to the right. Let me write it down here. I'm going to move negative 4 to the right by adding 4 to both sides of the equation. Okay. Fíjense que cuando está en la forma estándar, la C es el constante, el número que no tiene un variable. Así que lo primero que voy a hacer es mover negativo 4 a la izquierda, a la derecha, que diga. Actually, I just realized I made a mistake here. Alright, sorry, I didn't really pay attention to the whole problem. Let me backtrack. Let me change let me change my first move. You could do what I just said. But let me do something else instead. Because I think this will keep it more simple. Me di cuenta de un error que estaba haciendo y se puede hacer de la manera que lo estaba explicando, pero para hacerlo lo más fácil posible, déjame explicarlo de otra manera. Alright, okay, so look. A, remember that A has to be 0. A cannot be negative. Okay, so I'm going to move the minus 4x to the right. And let me do that first, okay? Recuerden que A no puede ser negativo. Así que voy a mover negativo 4x a la derecha. Déjame empezar de esa manera. Alright, so I'm going to move minus 4x to the right by adding 4x to both sides. When I do that, I'm going to get negative 6y minus 4 equals 4x. Okay, now I'm going to move the negative 6y to the right so that the x and the y could be on the same side. Ahora voy a mover negativo 6y a la derecha para que x y estén en el mismo lado. So I add 6y to both sides. When I do that, I'm going to have negative 4 equals 4x plus 6y. I have a very important step left, so don't think we're done. I got to show you something important, okay? All right, so this appears to be my final answer. Let me write it out in the correct way, which is this. However, there's one more step that I got to go over, okay? Eso me da lo que parece ser la respuesta final, pero me falta un paso bien importante. Okay, remember one of the conditions was that the greatest common factor of A, B, and C has to be 1. Okay, that means if, like for example, in what I'm looking at right here, the greatest common factor is actually 2. All of these numbers have 2 as the greatest common factor. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. So another way of saying that is this. If I could divide A, B, and C by an integer to make them smaller, the same way that you simplify fractions, okay? If I could divide all three of these numbers by a number to make them smaller, you have to simplify. If you write the answer like this, you're going to get it wrong because it's not simplified. Okay, so for this example, I got to divide all three of these numbers, A, B, and C, by 2 to make them simplified. So my final answer is actually 2x plus 3y equals negative 2. That is the final answer in standard form, simplified. Again, if you write this as your answer, you're going to get it marked wrong because it's not simplified. If you could simplify A, B, and C by dividing all three of them by a number, you got to do that. Now with my new answer, the greatest common factor of A, B, and C is 1. Ok, así que aquí parece como si está en la forma estándar, pero me falta un paso. Una de las condiciones para estar en esta forma es que el factor más grande que tienen en común tiene que ser 1. Y lo que tenemos aquí es, con estos números, es que el factor más grande que tienen en común es el número 2, porque 2 por 2 me da 4, 2 por 3 me da 6 y 2 por negativo 2 me da negativo 4. En otras palabras, si yo puedo dividir A, B y C, estos tres números, si lo puedo dividir por un número entero para hacerlo más chiquito, lo tengo que hacer. Tengo que simplificar esta ecuación. Si lo escribo mi respuesta en esta forma, me lo va a marcar mal porque no está simplificado. Es el mismo concepto que cuando simplifican fracciones. Así que como estos tres números se pueden simplificar dividiendo por 2, lo tengo que hacer. Así que mi respuesta final es 2x más 3y igual a negativo 2. All right, now let's look at problems with fractions. We got 2 examples with fractions, and I'm going to show you how to get rid of the fractions easy. Okay. Ahora tenemos 2 ejemplos con fracciones y le voy a enseñar cómo quitar las fracciones fácil. All right, so here's our problem. Negative 8 over 3x equals 10 over 3y minus 7 over 4. Okay, look, so the first thing I'm going to do is let me rearrange the terms. Let me move them around so that they could be in standard form, except for the fraction, which I'll show you how to get rid of. In other words, let me move it so that a is positive, because right now the number in front of x is negative. So I got to move this term to the right to make it positive, and this term right here, which is the c term, to the left to make it positive. Okay, so let me do that first, and I'm going to do it mental math, because if I write it out, I feel like it's going to make this look more complicated than it is. So if I move this term to the right, it's going to become positive 8 over 3x plus 10 over 3y. And I'm going to move the negative, or the minus 7 over 4 to the left, which will make it positive 7 over 4. I think that's the easiest way to look at this, all right? Now on top of that, let me write it so that this part is in the front and this part is in the back. So 8 over 3x plus 10 over 3y. I promise you this will be easy, okay? All right, so so let me just repeat that in Spanish real quick. Lo primero que hice es moví no lo escribí para no hacerlo lucir demasiado complicado, pero A tiene que ser positivo, o mejor dicho, A no puede ser negativo, A no puede ser negativo. Así que moví este término a la derecha que lo cambia a positivo. Positivo 8 sobre 3x. Y ahora como tengo x y en el mismo lado, tuve que mover este término que es la c a la izquierda que lo cambia a positivo. Positivo 7 sobre 4. Y ahora si escribo con esta parte al frente, me da lo que tengo aquí. Okay, now to get rid of the fraction, look how simple this is. I know most of you guys, most people hate dealing with fractions, right? It could be a headache. So look at this. We've seen this before. The easiest way to get rid of the denominator is to multiply the entire equation by a multiple of 3 and 4. Multiply the entire equation by a multiple of 3 and 4. A multiple of 3 and 4 is the number 12. If you can't think of a multiple, just multiply those denominators together and you'll get 12. 3 times 4 is 12. If I multiply the entire equation, both sides, by 12, that'll get rid of all the denominators, as I'll show you right now, okay? La manera más fácil de quitar las fracciones y eliminar esos denominadores es multiplicar los dos lados de la ecuación por un múltiple de 3 y 4. La manera más fácil de pensar de un múltiple de 3 y 4 es multiplicar 3 por 4 y te da 12. Alright, so now look how I'm going to do it, because I'm going to kind of do it mental math, alright? The easiest way to do this, the slow way would be 12 times 8 and whatever number that gives you divided by 3. That's slow. The intelligent way that you should do it is like this. What's 12 divided by 3? 12 divided by 3 is 4. 4 times 8 is 32x. Here's another way to say it. If I divide both of these numbers by 3, this becomes a 1 and this becomes a 4. And 4 times 8 is 32x. Over here, I'm multiplying, I'm multiplying this by 12. Alright, so again, what's 12 divided by 3? 4. 4 times 10 is 40. So I got 40y. On this side, the intelligent way is to do 12 divided by 4. 12 divided by 4 is 3. 3 times 7 is 21. Another way to think about it is that you're simplifying these two numbers by dividing them both by 4. If I divide them both by 4, 4 divided by 4 becomes a 1. 12 divided by 4 becomes a 3. 3 times 7 is 21. That's something that you should have learned in middle school. Alright, so this should be a review. Please don't act like this is complicated. Another way to think about it is just 12, this number divided by this number. What does it give you? It gives you 4. Now 4 times 8 is 32. 12 divided by 3 is 4. 4 times 10 is 40. Over here, I'm doing the same thing. 12 divided by 4 is 3. 3 times 7 is 21. And now, as you'll see, now these three numbers are simplified. You cannot simplify this any further. There's no whole number that exists that you could divide into A, B, and C to make it smaller. So this is my final simplified answer. Let me repeat this in Spanish. En español, la manera más fácil de quitar esos denominadores es multiplicar la ecuación entera por un múltiple de 3 y 4, que en este caso sería 12. Ahora, la manera más inteligente y rápido y fácil de multiplicar esto sería primero simplificar el 12 y el 3. ¿Qué es 12 dividido por 3? 4. Y 4 por 8 me da 32x. En otras palabras, es como si lo que estoy haciendo es simplificando el 12 y el 3, dividiendo los dos por 3. Si divido 3 por 3 me da 1. Si divido 12 por 3 me da 4. 4 por 8 me da 32. Estoy haciendo lo mismo aquí. ¿Ok? Una manera de pensar de esto sería 12 dividido por este 3 me da 4. Y ese 4 multiplicado por este 10 me da 40. Otra manera de explicarlo es lo mismo que hice aquí. Estoy simplificando el 12 y el 3, dividiéndolo los dos por 3. Eso me da este 4 y multiplico ese 4 por este 10 y me da 40. La misma cosa en el otro lado. 12 dividido por 4 me da 3 y 3 por 7 es 21. O otra manera es de pensar de esto es, estoy simplificando el 12 y el 4, dividiendo los 2 por 4. 4 dividido por 4 me da este 1 y 12 dividido por 4 me da este 3. 3 por 7 me da 21. All right, last example, which is the most complicated one. Let's look at it. Everybody should look at this one. Okay? Este es el último ejemplo que es el más, que luce el más complicado. All right, so let's look at how you do it. It's very similar to what I just did. So on this one, first I'm gonna move this term to the left so that A will not be negative. Okay, lo primero que voy a hacer es mover este término para la izquierda para que A no sea negativo. Alright, so now I have that. Okay, ahora tengo esto. Okay, now listen, as you can see, we got 3 different denominators. Okay, and in this case, this is not always the case, but in this case, what I'm going to tell you works for every time you have a situation like this, alright? In order to figure out what's the least common multiple of 3, 7, and 8, the quickest way, and in this case it's the correct way, is to just multiply all 3 numbers together. Right? 3 times 7 times 8. Just multiply them, all 3 numbers together, and whatever that gives you, that's what you should multiply the entire equation by. That's going to be the quickest way to get rid of the fractions. Okay? So 3 times 7 is 21, and 21 times 8 is going to give me 168. All right, so that's what I got to multiply both sides of the equation by. Okay, en este caso que tengo 3 denominadores diferentes. Okay, no siempre va a ser la manera más rápida, pero esta manera trabaja en todas estas situaciones y en este caso es la manera más rápida. Okay, es para encontrar el múltiple más pequeño de 3, 7 y 8. La manera más rápida de hacerlo en este caso es multiplicar los 3 números, 3 por 7 por 8, que me da 168. Por ese número tengo que multiplicar los dos lados de la ecuación para eliminar las fracciones. Okay, so again, I'm going to do it the fast way. Okay, 168 divided by 3, what does that give me? And whatever that gives me times 5, all right? So 168 divided by 3, you should be able to do it mental math. It's going to give you 56. Okay? 168 dividido por 3 me da 56. Okay, it gives me 56. So now I'm going to multiply 56 times 5. Ahora voy a multiplicar 56 por 5. 56 times 5, mental math, is going to give me 280. Alright, 56 times 5 is going to give me 280. 56 por 5 me da 280. Now I'm going to do the same thing right here. I'm multiplying 168 times negative 9 over 7. So first thing I'm going to do is 168 divided by 7. I'm kind of running out of space. Let me do it down here. This will be my answer. Let me do it down here. Voy a hacer la misma cosa, 168 dividido por 7 y lo que me dé lo voy a multiplicar por negativo 9. So 168 divided by 7 is going to give me 24. Okay, me da 24. So now 24 times negative 9, it's going to give me a negative number. 24 por negativo 9 me da un número negativo. 9 times 4 is 36. Carry the 9. I'm sorry, 9 times 4 is 36. Carry the 3. 9 times 2 is 18. Plus the 3 is going to give me 21. Okay, and then on the other side, I got to do 168 divided by 8. And whatever that gives me, multiply it times 1. So 168 divided by 8. This, if you look at it, you could do it mental math if you know your timetables. 8 goes into 16 2 times and into 8 1 time. So 21 times 1 is 1. I'm sorry, 21 times 1 is 21. All right, so there's my final answer. All right, I already checked this on IXL and it can't be simplified. Yeah, that one had big numbers, all right? So in the challenge zone, you're going to have questions like this. And remember, you got to get to 100. So that means that you got to understand how to do the questions in the challenge zone. Getting to 90 is really easy on this one. All right, but on the challenge zone, you got to make sure you know how to do these additional problems here. Okay, Así que ahí tengo mi respuesta final. A la vez que llegan a 90 o que pasan 90, los problemas que van a tener son como esta. Y recuerden que en todas mis tareas de IXL tienen que llegar a 100 puntos. Así que tienen que entender cómo hacer estos problemas que son más difíciles. All right, guys, that concludes this lesson. The IXL is IXL, just to repeat, IXL S17, in case anybody's joining us late. IXL section S17, and it's due by 6 a.m. of the next day that you have my class, okay? Esta es la tarea en la sección S17 de IXL y lo tienen que entregar antes de las 6 de la mañana el próximo día que tienen mi clase. That's all. Have a great day, guys.